She's already dead. Leave her. Good riddance. One less beggar on Fifth Avenue. Different voices drifted from the gloved passers-by, each one colder than the last. Shame, though, a doorman muttered, pulling his coat tighter, though his eyes never left his phone. Stop. Stop. Simon Albert's voice cut through the wind. He stood frozen, his $1,000 shoes ankle-deep in slush, his eyes locked on the small, blue figure slumped against the iron gate. The girl wasn't moving. Her lips were violet. Her fingers were black. Then the wind shifted her collar, and Simon's breath caught. A flash of carved sapphire. Unmistakable. Impossible. His chest tightened. Who is she? He demanded, his voice shaking with something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Someone call an ambulance. Before we continue, kindly click on the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from. She's a street kid, his driver said flatly. Sir, we're late for the gala. I don't care. Simon dropped to his knees in the snow. This is New York, Mr. Albert, a security guard called out. You can't save them all. But Simon wasn't listening. His hand hovered over the necklace. His asterisk necklace. The one he'd carved by hand in a workshop that no longer existed, in a version of himself he'd buried under steel and stock options. He lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light. The sapphire burned cold against his palm. The world had gone quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the expensive kind. The kind that cost $40 million for a penthouse where even the silence was imported. Simon Albert owned the skyline, but he hadn't seen the stars in years. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Black tie gala, champagne with the mayor, a press release about the Albert Tower, the crown jewel of his empire, the building that would make him untouchable. But then he saw blue. Not the blue of the winter sky, drained and metallic. Not the blue of his fiancée's Cartier diamonds. The blue of a half-frozen child, crumpled in a snowdrift like discarded wrapping paper. His limousine idled behind him, warm and leather-scented. Elena was inside, reapplying lipstick, annoyed at the delay. His PR team was already spinning excuses for his absence. But Simon couldn't move, because around the girl's neck, dirt-streaked, frostbitten, barely breathing, was a sapphire pendant he had carved with his own hands 15 years ago. A pendant he had given to Sarah Mitchell on a summer night that smelled like wildflowers and gasoline. Back when he was nobody, back when he still believed love was something you could build a life on. A pendant that should have been buried with her. His heart, a muscle he'd trained to stay cold, to calculate, to win, suddenly remembered how to pound. The camera pulls back. A man in a $15,000 coat, kneeling in the gutter, cradling a ghost. The music shifts. Strings rise. The city doesn't stop. It never does. But Simon Albert, the iron architect, the man who turned Pittsburgh rust into Manhattan gold, feels something crack inside his chest. And for the first time in a decade, he doesn't try to fix it. The gala was in 17 minutes. Simon Albert didn't do late. Late was for people who apologized, who waited, who needed things from other people. He stepped out of the Maybach into air so cold it felt like breathing glass. Mr. Albert, the mayor's already asked for you twice. He didn't answer. His eyes had caught on something wrong. A shape that didn't belong in the geometry of snow and iron, a splash of color against the white like a bruise. Blue, not fabric. Skin. Simon's legs moved before his brain gave permission. Behind him, Elena's voice rose sharp from inside the car. Something about photographers waiting, about optics. But he was already kneeling. The girl was small. Maybe 10, maybe 14, starvation made it impossible to tell. Her lips were the color of a day-old corpse. Her fingernails were black. She'd curled into herself like a question mark, trying to conserve heat she no longer had. She wasn't shivering. That was worse. "Call 911, Simon barked. He touched her neck, feeling for a pulse, and his fingers brushed against something else. Metal. Stone. His hand froze. The necklace was crude. A raw sapphire wrapped in copper wire turned green with age. He knew every twist of that wire. He'd made it in his uncle's garage with a blowtorch and pliers and hands that didn't shake yet. He'd given it to Sarah the night before he left. Asterisk, wait for me. I'll come back. Asterisk. He never did. The stone caught the streetlight, and Simon forgot how to breathe. Sarah was dead. The necklace should have been buried with her. But here it was, on the neck of a dying child. 15 minutes for an ambulance. We don't wait. Simon scooped her up. She weighed nothing. Behind him, Elena was out of the car now, her voice acid. "Simon, what are you doing?" He turned, looked at his fiancée with her champagne gown and calculated concern, and felt something crack. "Get in," he said quietly, "or don't." He carried the girl toward the Maybach, her frozen fingers clutching the sapphire like a key. The penthouse was 43 floors above anything that mattered. Simon stood at the window with a glass of scotch he wouldn't drink, watching the city arrange itself into grids of light and shadow. From up here, people were just motion, purposeful dots flowing between buildings he owned, living in apartments his firm had designed, working in offices where his signature sat in the cornerstone. He'd built an empire on the principle that everything could be reduced to blueprint and E-line. Emotion was poor engineering. Sentiment was structural weakness. The apartment reflected this. 16,000 square feet of marble and glass and silence. Everything sharp angles and clean lines. Nothing soft enough to hold a memory. The furniture was Italian, expensive, uncomfortable. He'd chosen it because a designer told him it was important, not because he'd ever sat in it for longer than it took to sign a contract. He slept 4 hours a night in a bed that cost more than his childhood home. He ate meals prepared by a chef he'd never met, delivered on schedule, consumed alone. The kitchen gleamed and used. The dining table seated 12 and had never heard laughter. Elena had her own wing. They saw each other at events, in photographs, in carefully choreographed moments that looked like intimacy from the outside. She didn't ask where he'd been tonight. She'd stopped asking years ago. His phone buzzed. 17 new messages. The board wanted answers about the girl. His lawyer wanted to discuss liability. His publicist wanted to control the narrative. Simon ignored them all. The guest room at the end of the hall was where they'd put her. Hannah. The doctor had come and gone, leaving antibiotics and grave looks and a prognosis that depended on things Simon couldn't buy: will, fight, reason to survive. He'd stood in the doorway watching her sleep, this ghost wrapped in his 1,000 thread count sheets, the sapphire still around her neck because the EMTs couldn't figure out the clasp and Simon wouldn't let them cut it. She looked like Sarah. Same nose, same stubborn chin, same way of making him feel like every choice he'd ever made was wrong. Hannah woke to softness. That was wrong. The world wasn't soft. The world was concrete and cardboard, frozen grates and the sharp edge of hunger that never really stopped, just dulled into background noise like traffic. She kept her eyes closed, trying to map the wrongness. Warm. She was warm. That hadn't happened in weeks, maybe months. Time got strange when you were cold all the time. It stretched and contracted like something alive. The smell was wrong too. Clean. Expensive clean, the kind that came from things she didn't have words for. Not the chemical burn of shelter disinfectant or the sweet rot smell of the subway. This was lavender and something else, something that whispered money in a language her body understood even if her brain didn't. She opened her eyes. The ceiling was so high it made her dizzy. White, perfectly white, like someone had stolen a piece of cloud and stretched it flat. A chandelier hung above her. Actual crystal, the kind she'd seen through restaurant windows, the kind that cost more than most people made in a year. Hannah sat up fast, too fast. Her head swam. She was in a bed the size of her mother's entire apartment, wrapped in sheets that felt like water, like touching something you weren't supposed to touch. The room was bigger than any place she'd ever lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spread out below like a carpet of lights. She was high up, really high up, the kind of high that meant you'd made it, meant you'd won whatever game everyone else was playing. Her clothes were gone. Someone had put her in pajamas, silk, butter soft, with a price tag someone forgot to remove. $340. For pajamas. Hannah's throat tightened. She looked down at herself. Her hands were bandaged. White gauze wrapped around fingers she could barely feel. The black was still there underneath, she knew. Frostbite didn't wash off. The necklace was still around her neck. She touched it, felt the familiar rough edges of the stone, the twisted wire. The only thing her mother had left her besides stories and an address that turned out to be a lie. The door opened. A woman in a uniform, actual uniform like in the movies, stepped in with a tray. She stopped when she saw Hannah was awake, and something flickered across her face. Pity, maybe, or discomfort. The look people got when they saw something that reminded them the world wasn't fair. "You're awake," the woman said, like it was a surprise, like maybe they thought she wouldn't be. "Mr. Albert will want to know. Are you hungry?" Hannah stared at her, at the tray with its covered dishes and folded napkin and glass of orange juice that probably cost more than Hannah used to spend on food in a week. "Where's my mom?" Her voice came out rough, broken glass in her throat. The woman's face went carefully blank. "I'll get Mr. Albert." She left quickly, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a lock. Chapter 4. Simon had been 22 and stupid with hope. The memory came back sharp as he stood outside Hannah's door, sharper than it had any right to be after 15 years of deliberate forgetting. Sarah Mitchell in cut-off shorts and a tank top stained with motor oil, laughing at something he'd said. Her hands black with grease from the Chevy they'd been trying to resurrect in her father's garage. He'd loved her the way poor kids love, desperately, like it was the only currency they had. She'd worked doubles at the diner on Route 9, saving for community college. He'd worked construction, breaking his back for $12 an hour, and a foreman who called him college boy, like it was an insult. They'd meet after shifts, too tired to do anything but sit on the hood of her car and plan impossible futures. "We'll get out," he'd told her, his hand finding hers in the dark. "Both of us. I'll go to the city first, get established, then I'll send for you. 6 months, maybe a year." She'd looked at him with those eyes that saw through every lie he'd ever told himself. "You'll forget me, Simon Albert. You'll get up there with all those big buildings and realize I'm just some small-town girl who smells like coffee and broken dreams." Never. He'd meant it. God, he'd meant it. "I'm going to build something, Sarah. Something real. And then I'm coming back for you." The night before he left, he'd given her the necklace. The sapphire was raw, uncut, something he'd found in a creek bed when they were kids. He'd wrapped it in copper wire with hands that shook, trying to make something beautiful out of nothing, the way he'd been trying to do his whole life. "It's ugly," she'd said, but she was crying. "It's a promise," he'd corrected. "Wait for me." She'd kissed him then, tasting like salt in summer, and he believed, actually believed, that love was enough, that wanting something badly enough made it real. The city had other lessons. He'd sent letters at first, every week, then every month, then whenever guilt outweighed exhaustion. Her responses got shorter, sadder, more resigned. Then one day he'd written about his first big deal, about the partnership he'd landed, about the apartment with the view, and she'd written back, Asterisk, I'm happy for you. You were always going to be someone. Asterisk, past tense, like he'd already left. He'd told himself it was mutual, that they'd both moved on, that she'd understand he couldn't come back. Not yet. Not when he was so close to everything they dreamed about. The letters stopped. He didn't follow up. It was easier that way, cleaner. He'd built his empire on that convenience, on the practiced art of not looking back. 3 years later, his uncle had called. Sarah was dead. Pneumonia. No insurance. By the time someone found her, it was too late. Simon had sent flowers to a funeral he didn't attend. Then he'd buried her the way he'd buried everything else from that life. Deep, where it couldn't touch him. Except now she was touching him. Through a half-frozen girl and a copper wire necklace and eyes that knew exactly what he'd done. Elena found the photograph in Simon's study at 3 in the morning. She hadn't meant to snoop. That was a lie. She always meant to snoop. Information was currency, and marriage was just a merger with better tax benefits. She'd learned that from her father, who'd married and divorced his way through 4 fortunes before his liver finally quit. The photo was old, creased, tucked inside a book Simon probably hadn't opened in years. A girl with dark hair and eyes that looked like they knew things. Pretty in that small-town way that didn't photograph well but probably destroyed men in person. She was wearing the necklace. Elena's hand tightened on the frame. She'd seen that necklace 2 hours ago, around the neck of the street rat currently sleeping in their guest room. The one Simon had carried through the lobby like some kind of deranged savior, ruining a $15,000 coat and tanking their stock price by 3 points because videos had already hit social media. Her phone was already out, already searching. Sarah Mitchell, the metadata on the photo read. She typed the name into every search engine, every social media platform, every public record database her lawyer had given her access to. Dead. 14 years ago. Pneumonia. Elena did the math twice to be sure. The girl upstairs was 14. Maybe 15, hard to tell with the malnutrition. Dark hair. Same stubborn chin. Same eyes that looked at Simon like he owed them something. "Oh, you stupid man," Elena whispered to the empty study. She'd spent 3 years positioning herself. 3 years of charity galas and strategic smiles and letting Simon's cold, mechanical affection pass for love because his net worth made up for what his heart lacked. She was 6 months from a ring that came with a prenup she'd already found 3 loopholes in. And now this, a ghost with a birth certificate. Elena pulled out her phone and dialed Marcus Chen, the board member who'd been circling Simon's position like a shark for 2 years. "We need to talk," she said, "about succession planning." The fever came back on the 3rd night. Simon heard her from the hallway, small, broken sounds that didn't belong to a child. He found her thrashing in the sheets, skin burning, eyes open but seeing something else entirely. "Mama, I'm cold." Her voice was small, younger than 14. "Mama, wake up." The doctor had warned him. Pneumonia, severe malnutrition. Her body was fighting wars on multiple fronts. "Hannah." Simon touched her forehead. "Fire." "Hannah, you're safe. You're." "The shelter's full again." She wasn't talking to him. "We can sleep in the station. It's warm in the station." Simon's chest tightened. "No, Mama, don't cry. I'm not hungry. I ate at school." Her hands clutched at nothing. "I know you gave me your food. I know." "Christ. We'll find him, Mama." We'll find my dad. You said he's in the city. You said he builds buildings. We just have to... She coughed, wet and rattling. We just have to look up. Simon felt something break behind his ribs. She loved you. Hannah's eyes found his without seeing him. She said you were going to come back. She said you promised. A tear tracked down her fevered cheek. Why didn't you come back? I'm here, Simon whispered. But she was already gone again, back into whatever burning landscape her mind had made. Mama's so cold now. Mama won't wake up. Someone help, please. Mama gave me her coat and now she won't. Her voice fractured into coughing. Simon held her hand and felt 15 years of success turn to ash in his mouth. The emergency board meeting was called for 9 a.m. Simon walked into the Albert Tower conference room to find vultures in suits. Elena sat at the far end, perfect and poisonous in Chanel. Marcus Chun occupied Simon's usual seat, a calculated insult. Glad you could join us, Marcus said. We were just discussing your recent behavior. Simon remained standing. My behavior? You've missed 4 critical meetings. Elena's voice was silk over steel. You carried a vagrant into our home. You've been distracted. The girl is sick. The girl is a liability. Marcus slid a folder across the table. We've had 3 major investors call with concerns. The media is running stories about your mental breakdown. Your obsession with this child is affecting the company. Simon opened the folder. Psychiatric evaluations. Testimonies from staff about his erratic behavior. A motion to remove him as CEO pending competency review. You had me evaluated. We had you observed, Elena corrected. Simon, we're worried about you. This fixation on a random homeless girl, it's not rational. Unless, she paused, perfectly timed. Unless she's not random. The room went quiet. DNA test results take 72 hours, Marcus said. We can have them expedited. Unless you'd like to save us all the trouble and confirm what we already suspect. Simon looked at Elena, at the woman he'd almost married, at the carefully constructed trap she'd laid. The vote is 13-1, Marcus continued. Effective immediately, you're removed from operational authority pending. No. Simon's voice cut through the room. You want the company? Take it. He turned toward the door. I choose her. The DNA results arrived the same day Hannah's fever broke. Simon opened the envelope in his study, hands steadier than they should have been. 99.9% probability of paternity. The numbers blurred. He had a daughter, had always had a daughter. While he was buying his 3rd property, she was learning what hunger felt like. While he was closing the Mitchell deal, Christ, he'd named a building after Sarah's last name without even thinking about it. His child was sleeping in subway stations. The letters were in Hannah's backpack, the one she'd been clutching when he found her, frozen into her arms like a life raft. His housekeeper had set it aside, and Simon had finally forced himself to look inside. 17 envelopes, all addressed to him, none ever sent. Dear Simon, she's beautiful. She has your eyes. Asterisk, dear Simon, she's walking now. She asks about you. Asterisk, dear Simon, I lost the apartment. We're staying with friends. Dear Simon, there are no more friends. Asterisk, dear Simon, I'm so tired. Asterisk, dear Simon, I'm teaching her to be strong, the way you taught me. Asterisk,
Dear Simon, I'm sorry.
I tried. I really tried. Asterisk, the last one was dated 3 months ago. Sarah's handwriting, but wrong, shaky, desperate. Asterisk, dear Simon, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Her name is Hannah. She's yours. She's everything. Please, please don't leave her the way you left me. Asterisk. Simon sat in his $40 million penthouse surrounded by everything he'd built, holding letters from a woman he'd killed with his ambition. He'd spent 15 years becoming successful. He'd spent 15 years becoming his father. The realization didn't hurt the way he expected. It just felt true. Simon found Sarah's grave in a county cemetery 2 hours north of the city.
No headstone.
Just a numbered marker in a field of numbered markers, the kind they gave people who died without money or family willing to claim them. He'd sent flowers to a funeral. He'd never asked where they'd buried her. Hannah stood beside him, still pale, still too thin, but standing. The necklace caught the morning light. She talked about you every day, Hannah said quietly. Even at the end, she said you were going to build something important. Simon's throat closed. I built the wrong things. He'd signed the papers that morning, liquidated his shares, transferred assets, dissolved partnerships that had taken years to forge. Marcus and Elena could have the tower. They could have all of it. He'd kept enough to matter, enough to do something that actually meant something. The foundation would be called the Sarah Mitchell Project. Housing for homeless mothers and children, medical care, education, second chances for people the city had forgotten. It wouldn't bring her back. It wouldn't erase 15 years of absence. But it was a start. I'm sorry, he said to the numbered grave, to the ghost, to the girl standing beside him who had her mother's eyes. I'm sorry I didn't come back. I'm sorry I was too proud and too stupid and too afraid to be the person you thought I was. Hannah's hand found his. She forgave you, she said. She told me, right before. She said everyone gets lost sometimes. What matters is finding your way home. Simon looked at his daughter, his daughter, and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years, like maybe he was allowed to try again. Let's go home, he said, and for the first time he knew what the word meant.